I have to ask about the unwind of private equity, and that everyone's talking about we need to liquefy, we need to cash out of private equity. How urgent into the autumn of this year is it for private equity to find an exit?
Well, I don't think it's quite that dramatic a problem. Private equity's been around for a while. It's taken longer to sell assets than it normally does, but as interest rates come down, almost certainly they'll come down in September, I think it'll make it easier because the gap between buyers and sellers will, I think, be reduced, and buyers can afford to buy things more readily than they could when higher interest rates were part of the situation. So I think private equity is okay. I wouldn't cry for private equity. I think that private credit has also grown very large and become a very important part of the private investment world, but private equity is still a very important part of the global investment scene, and I don't think it's going to change very much.
You mentioned private credit, David. For a lot of our listeners, that's been something, a new asset class that's become
Correct.
very large, maybe over the last 10 years or so. Give us your views of the private credit market and how that fits into the capital markets overall.
Well, for those who aren't familiar with it, for most times when you wanted to borrow money for a business acquisition, you go to a bank or something like a bank. But in recent years, people have been going to institutions like private equity firms which built their own private credit businesses. And these are basically institutions which are lending money the way banks did, but without some of the regulatory constraints. And obviously the banks aren't as happy about it because the private credit people aren't as regulated as banks. And the reason for that is the banks have FDIC deposit money, whereas the private credit people are lending money that is not FDIC insured. But there haven't been very many defaults generally, and I think the private credit business has grown to be as large, if not larger, than the private equity business. It's a very large and very profitable business if you know what you're doing.
June 21st, Orioles rout Yankees for 22nd straight win or tie in AL East. It's been wonderful. What's the key distinction between the Rubenstein Orioles and the Yankees, the dreaded Yankees? What's the difference between Oriole ball at Camden Yards and what we see, this travesty in the Bronx?
Well, the Orioles and the Yankees have been jockeying for first place in the American League East for most of the season. They both have excellent teams. We'll just have to see who does well in September and the remainder of August. But I think both of those teams are likely to be in the playoffs, in my view. Yankees have some extraordinary players, and the Orioles have some extraordinary players.
Their ability to lose to the Chicago White Sox, I don't know if your team has briefed you, but the White Sox snuck by the Yankees last night. That would never happen to the Baltimore Orioles.
Well, we've lost some games that I didn't think we would lose, but on the whole, I would say the Orioles and the Yankees are really in good shape for the playoffs, and I don't know who's going to win, but I hope the Orioles do, of course.